For years and years, I've been intrigued by British scones and clotted cream. But guess what? I can't find either one where I live. So I made both of them. Today we're going to concentrate on the British scone. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. Today's recipe is super easy to make. Hopefully, I got it right. Because guess what? I've never had an authentic British scone. But I did send the recipe off to a friend of mine who makes British scones quite frequently, and she said it was really good. So I will look forward to hearing feedback from anybody who is, a connoisseur of a British scone. And I want to hear, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? After you make the recipe, is the texture right? Because what I understand, an American biscuit and British scones have a little bit in common, but the texture's different. So a really good Southern biscuit would be a little crisp on the outside and then really light, flaky in the middle. So you could actually see the flaky layers. Whereas a British scone has that same light little crispness to the outside when they're first out of the oven or the air fryer, because that's how we're gonna make them today. And then in the middle, it's a little denser, but not dry. It's really hard to explain. Like the way that I like to think of it is it's more the texture of a cupcake, but not as sweet and not as fluffy. So it's like a dense cupcake. It's so confusing, isn't it? Anyway, just make them and then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So they're really easy to make. You don't need any special equipment. You will want to have some sort of a biscuit cutter for this. And I do understand that like using a glass like we can with a biscuit doesn't really work for the scones, that you really need that sharp edge to cut through them. So anyway, super easy. You only need a few ingredients and you probably already have them in your pantry. 2 cups of all-purpose flour. You can use self-rising flour, which I know that they do quite often in recipes, but I never carry it. I don't have it in my pantry, so I use all-purpose flour, a little bit of salt, and baking powder. So if you're gonna use self-rising flour, make sure you know how much baking powder is in it and how much salt is in it, because you're gonna need to adjust those ingredients in this recipe. All right, to the 2 cups of flour, I'm gonna add 1/4 teaspoon of a fine grind sea salt or a kosher salt. I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of sugar. You can cut that back if you want, but I thought this was a nice balance, or not overly sweet. 4 teaspoons of baking powder, and that is our dry mixture. So just kind of move that all around with a little fork. And then we are gonna put in 4 tablespoons of butter. My butter is salted. You could use unsalted and then put an extra little pinch of salt in, or you can use salted butter. Either way is fine. I just never have unsalted butter, so all my recipes usually call for salted butter. And we're gonna grate that into the flour. And the butter should be cold. Mine's actually been sitting here for a few minutes, but it'll be okay. But it should be cold right out of the refrigerator. You can even freeze it if you want. It grates a little cleaner when it's super cold. See how I've got that? Just because it's been out for a little bit. All right, now, you're gonna use your hands for most of this. And it's important, really, that you do use your hands because you wanna get the texture of the butter and the flour correct, okay? That's a key part. And it's not the same as biscuit making, okay? We're gonna make these little smaller balls of flour, okay? So just go right in and start mixing around. Move your butter around and just start tossing it around. Then we're gonna start to break it up and form these little balls of butter and flour. So just run it through your fingers like that, okay? You don't need to use a pastry cutter either with this. In fact, I read that it's recommended that you don't, because we are not just cutting it in like you do with a biscuit. We are actually like making it more like a sand, okay? And that's how you get the right texture in the biscuit. From what I understand. I'm gonna hope I did this right. So once you have little balls all throughout the flour, then it's time to make a well and start with the wet ingredients. And that looks pretty good. So like it just looks like a little clumpy flour, right? All right, now what I do is I kind of take this like I'm making pasta, okay? It's probably not the right way to do it, but that's the way I do it. So I make a little well here and I put my one large egg in there, take a fork. I don't worry about washing my hands because we're gonna get right back in there with the hands here. And I just sort of beat that egg a little bit right there. You could beat it beforehand too. So you could beat it in your bowl, but I just do it just like this. And then I just bring the flour in and toss it around with the fork. Now we don't want to overhandle this dough, okay? Because we do want it to be, not flaky, but we do want it to be light. We don't want it to be like rock hard. All right, that's good. Now we put in our heavy cream. And I'm using 2/3 of a cup or 5 ounces in this recipe. And just pour that in. And so traditionally in like a Southern biscuit, you don't use an egg. And they probably don't even use heavy cream. And the egg sometimes is used, from what I understand, sometimes it's used in British scones, sometimes it's not. I chose to use it. I know the comments on this video are going to be really hilarious, but please try the recipe before you critique me too bad, okay? But I'm all for it. I want to learn, so I'm all for it. Okay, so once it gets kind of doughy like this, and most of the dry flour is now in bigger balls, we're going to turn it out onto our mat here, or any kind of clean work surface will be fine. You don't need to flour it. You could, I guess, a little bit, but I don't usually do it. Just dump it right out like that. Make sure you get everything out of the bottom, and it looks like a mess right now, right? That's okay. Now bring it all together and just press it together. This is similar to what we would do for a Southern biscuit. I like to just bring it back and kind of, I'm kneading it, but I don't want to handle the dough, but I do want to knead it so that everything is incorporated into a smooth dough. And it only takes 45 seconds. I'm done now. You feel it get moist in your hands. So it's pretty amazing. All right, so then once you have that, now we're gonna make our rectangle. Now, I don't know if this is correct, but I read that the British scone should be able to be pulled apart, and that is created by the way you roll out and assemble the dough and cut your scones. So I decided that I was gonna do it a certain way, and it worked. I just don't know if it's like the way that it's traditionally done, but it worked for me. So what I'm gonna do is put a little bit of flour here on the top, and I'm gonna roll this out to 1/2 inch and then fold it back. All right, now that the dough is all together, you can see it sticking just a little bit. We don't want that. So we are gonna flour our surface now, just like that. Just so when we go to roll it out, it doesn't stick and then break apart, because that will undo what we're doing here. So just like that, and then take a little bit, just put it right on top. Take your rolling pin. So roll it out until it's about 1/2 inch and in as much of a rectangle as you can get. Okay, that looks good. That's about 1/2 inch. And now I fold it back so that it's going to create a 1 inch block of dough. So once we have this folded, don't do anything, don't roll it back out. We want that separation. That's gonna give us that natural break line after we cook the scones. Take your well, you could use a cookie cutter, I guess, if it's round like this. Take your biscuit cutter and go straight down. No playing around with it. Straight down, straight up. And then pop it right out, okay? They look a lot like biscuits, don't they? Now see how we've got that natural break now because of how we form the dough. Okay, let's keep doing it. The amount of scones you get out of this will vary. based on the size of your biscuit cutter. I am using a 2.5 inch. I think that's a nice size and it fits in the air fryer really nice. All right, there we go. So we've got 5 done. And now when we're making the rest of them, what you want to do is, again, don't handle the dough. Don't start kneading it back. Just push it together. It doesn't have to be perfect, okay? And then get it back into a 1-inch mark. If you need a reference guide, use your scones that you already cut. There we go. So that is 7. So I'll get 8 out of this with a little extra. All right, there we go. Now these could be a little smoother, but you know what? It's not gonna make any difference. Those look pretty, don't they? Actually, you know, I might get 9 out of this one. This one won't bake up as well as the other ones, okay? It's gonna be a little bit flatter, but that's okay. All right, there we go. Now we're just gonna let them rest while we preheat the air fryer. So I'm gonna wash my hands up, we'll just leave these here, and then we'll get our air fryer preheated at 400 degrees for a full 10 minutes. All right, the final step before we get these scones onto the pan to bake is to brush them with a little bit of cream. Now, you wanna be careful. You don't want the cream to be going over the sides. You want the cream just to be on the very top here. If the cream goes over the sides, it can interfere with the rising of the scones. So just be a little careful when you do this. You could do an egg wash, like a egg white wash, but I figured since there's cream in the recipe, you're gonna have that. And this just makes it easy. Okay, perfect. I do have that little guy there. We'll see if he fits. Okay, so you can use a pizza pan like I am on the rack and low if you're using the Ninja Foodi. You can use the crisping plate. You can use an air fryer basket, whatever you want. You just want to place them about an inch apart. And you might have to cook them in batches. We'll see how many will get on here comfortably. I don't want them touching. So you know what? I'm going to do them in 2 batches. I'm not even going to put one. Well, I can put one in the center. Hey, let's put this guy in the center because he's the one that I don't think is going to rise as much. So let's see what happens. Just make sure they're not touching. Okay. I went a little over, so I'm going to have to add a minute. You want to air fry on 400 degrees Fahrenheit, 200 degrees Celsius for 8 minutes. Then once that time is up, leave them in the hot pot or the hot air fryer, whatever kind of air fryer you're using. Leave them in there for 2 minutes to finish cooking, but no heat. If you leave the heat on, the tops get too brown. If you take them out right away, they're not totally cooked in the middle. So 8 minutes of air fry at 400 or 200 Celsius and 2 minutes with the air fryer turned off. So after they bake for 8 minutes and then you leave them in the pot for 2 minutes, you're gonna open it up and they're gonna be a golden brown. Look, oh my gosh, look at that. They're beautiful. Now, if the tops are too brown for you, you can put the cream on halfway through and that will slow the browning. This is the middle guy. See, I told you it wasn't gonna rise the same. That one's really got an opening. So does this one. I can just put these right back on here. All right, there we go. Second batch in. All right, let's give them a taste. Oh my goodness. So they open up perfectly. They are denser than a biscuit. Like if you're making a Southern biscuit and you ended up with these, they're still delicious, but you'd be like, not flaky enough. But they are perfect for a scone, from what I understand. Then we've got our homemade clotted cream, which is one of the most delicious things I've ever tasted, I think. It is so simple and just so delicious. And usually, I think they put some sort of jam, like strawberry jam, but I don't have any. So let's put this in there. Now we've got our scone sandwich. Take a little bite. They're perfect. So perfect. Amazing. Now, whether I got it right or wrong, one thing I know for sure is I got it delicious. Try them out.